How you been anyway? What's happening?
Yeah, I've been good. I've been good. We
Yeah?
just wrapped up our fifth cohort
Cohort?
with
Yeah.
102 people across 10 countries. So
Wow.
just
10
doing all the
countries.
debrief. Yeah, I know. I
So is
know.
this all
So
remote,
just
I'm guessing? Like a bit of a mastermind kind of course thing? Or
it's hybrid.
uh,
So we have all of the content 100% online, but
yeah.
then we have alumni hosts in Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, and Lagos, Nigeria, who run in-person socials. I
Nigeria.
know.
Okay, there you go.
I just thrown. I know. The second largest country we're based in is Nigeria.
Wow. I wouldn't have guessed
Yeah,
that.
there's a
Why?
whole backstory.
Okay, I kind of need to know. But can we rewind? Can you just give us a quick like overview of like how you started this? Because I know you talked about this when we were on stage at South by Southwest Sydney, but I thought it was a really cool story. Like it was very organic, yeah?
Yeah, it was super organic.
Yeah.
We basically ran a meetup in 2021, and so for previous about 6 years before that, I was working at the intersection of startups and community building,
Hmm.
and basically noticed how hard it was to build community for different companies, especially in the startup space. So we ran a
Yeah.
meetup group for 17 people. And then fast forward a year from then, it just went viral. We had about 500 people just sign up instantly with no marketing, just through word of mouth. It was just an Airtable link getting shared around,
Wow.
and then quit my job. And then it's been running as a company for about 2.5 years.
I know you've answered this question many times before, but what is community if we had to define it really quickly and simply?
Yeah. So the definition of community is, in my eyes, a group of people who are connected by a shared sense of purpose, who support each other on a regular basis. And because we talk about building community in the context of a company, the difference between your neighborhood community or, just your local cooking group compared to Nike, an apparel brand, building Run Club as a free running community around the world within a business context. The difference is that there is a specific ROI, return on investment, that a company is looking to generate from the existence of that community. Whereas your local cooking group shouldn't be exploiting you to have other, motivations for success or growth other than you having a great time cooking.
Yeah.
So there are specific skills that I think great community builders have. And then there are really finite, sought after skills that professional community builders have when they build a community for a company.
In that case, can anyone do this from scratch, or is there any sort of major barriers to entry? Was it pretty organic? Like you started pretty easily.
Yeah, how do we get started? I think
Yeah.
anyone can bring people together. I guess the four key elements that we look for in terms of, so a lot of startups would look for product market fit. We would look
Hmm.
for community market fit. So I guess the biggest thing is actually looking for the signals that exist to start the community. So we look at four key elements in order for there to be demand to actually build a community. So the four key elements that we look for: one, there has to be audience demand. So if no one wants to join this community, it's going to be a very lonely ghost town. It's just you hanging out, supporting you, which is cool, but that's not a community. So there has to be audience demand. And we say minimum 50 to 100 people have opted in personally to you and said, yes, I'm keen, tell me more. Minimum, because from that 50 to 100, you're going to get a lot of drop off. So that's the minimum requirement on audience demand. Then we look at business objectives. So if you're going to build a community for a company, you have to have clear objectives that this is going to drive value for the company itself. So you look at, okay, where does the organization want to go in the next 12 months? So Broadsheet is a great example. It is a media company in Australia. Their goals over, the next 2 to 10 years might be grow their readership, generate more revenue, and land more paid customers. And so they decided to launch a community because that was really aligned with their business objectives. So obviously it's got to have a two-way value exchange. There has to be a clear element on resources. Building a community is time consuming. It doesn't happen overnight. We're dealing with humans, the most rogue customers and beings on the planet. So obviously, there needs to be the right resources: money, time, energy, expertise. So in terms of your question around can anyone build a community, anyone can build a community, but it depends on the sliding scale of how successful it will be based on the
Yep.
skills that they have and the demand that there is. And then the last element is landscape mapping. So you've got to understand that do 1,000 of these communities already exist? If there are heaps of other competitors, you'd be better off partnering and already supporting the existing communities and generating and pulling all your people there, as opposed to going out and building a new one and fighting for attention and just replicating something that already exists. So if you get a green light in all 4 of those areas, ding, 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 it's pretty easy. It's a lot easier to build a community, but that is just the start. And then there's a whole long-term plan and skill sets as well.
So, I mean, with that said, is there things that people think are a community and like doing community management and they probably aren't? Like, is that just failing those 4 tests, or is there like a difference between like getting a bunch of people on an email list or a newsletter, for example, and calling that community when it kind of isn't? Like, what would you say to that?
100%. Yeah. I think a great differentiation to walk through here is the difference between an audience and a community and a network. So very nuanced. Whereas if I say customer to you, you would think, yes, that person has paid money to buy a product for a company. It's got a very clear, defined line. But when we say audience, community, network, it gets a bit blurred. So we draw the lines. Audience is a group of people that consumes the content of a brand. Every company should have an audience. These are your newsletter subscribers, website traffic, social media followers. And really, these are the people that can't or don't really interact with each other. They don't support each other on an ongoing basis. Of course, you could have a chat in the Instagram comments, but they're not really supporting each other on an ongoing basis. So that we would call that an audience. And then we would call the community, obviously, that group of people who connect and support each other on an ongoing basis. And that would be a closed online or in-person space. So you could have a regular meetup in person once a month. These people are ongoing, supporting each other at this co-working space. Or it could be an online forum hosted on Discourse, like OpenAI have an online community on Discourse where everyone's talking to each other, supporting each other with their AI elements. And then the network, I would say, is the combination of the two. So at the Community Collective, we have 12,500 people in our audience. We have 700 in our community across 18 countries. So our combined network is over 13,500. And it's the two. Okay. But where people go wrong is Sally launches her beautiful new flower business and she starts a newsletter to hear about all of the amazing blossoms that are in stock every week. But on her website, she goes, join my community. And it's a call to action to subscribe to her newsletter. That in my mind would be misidentified because newsletter subscribers aren't chatting to each other. That's a massive breach of IP and data.
Whereas maybe a Facebook group where it's more of interaction between people and doesn't need to be managed by you, like you don't need to be logged in and whatever, like that would be more of a community, do you think? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So then if Sally said, you know what, I want to help create a space where we can all talk about the flowers that we buy our loved ones, then she could create a Facebook group, add everyone. And if there's enough momentum and engagement in the space, it would be a great community. But the thing is, Sally could launch that community for the flower group, but just because there are members in it and it's on a Facebook group, but there's no activity that happens there, is that a successful community? It could be called a community, but it would be debatable whether it's actually driving value to the people and Sally's business.
Okay, I like those litmus tests and that definition. So now that we kind of know what a community is and, the test whether to start one or not, which I think is really essential because, you get into some of these growth discussions and people go, hey, this person has a community, we should do that as well. How hard can it be? And maybe they don't think through, is that a good idea to do? Or can we just leverage someone else's community or like sponsor with them? Kind of like a podcast, right? It's like, do you actually need to start your own? I think is a question that doesn't get asked enough.
100%.
If you were advising someone, and I know you teach this in your cohort, but if someone was starting up a community, are there some like basic steps to go through before you get to like really valuable monetization? Like just say at the start you need XYZ, step 2 you need to kind of layer on XYZ, etc., etc. Can you just very basically explain what we're getting ourselves into?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a 4-step process about how to build a community, which is pretty wild because it's a very complicated thing, but we distill it down to 4 key steps of how to build a community from the ground up. So let's say that a business was going to launch a community. One, obviously, we would have taken that through that diagnostic framework already. So they got 4 green lights on all of them. We're like, woohoo, that's great. Yep. So then the first step is to notice and be niche. The second step is to engage early. The third is to share a solution. And then the fourth is a mindset of cultivating who, not how. So let's unpack all of those because otherwise they're just words that no one really understands. So let's take the story of the community collective of how we started. So we saw the 4 green lights and thought, wow, myself and 2 co-founders, Melia and Jala, thought, okay, there's totally an opportunity here. So we noticed a particular problem that a niche group of people were experiencing. So the noticing is, okay, what is the challenge? What is the pain point that these people are experiencing that they can't solve alone, or that it becomes even more challenging and lonely to do on their own without a community? Okay. So for us, we noticed that people during the pandemic were just shut at home online in Melbourne, confused and just struggling so much. I was personally running communities for founders and did over 350 courtesy calls to founders and just heard the most insane stories of people either shutting their business, opening new ones because the demand was so intense. It was just this juxtaposition of how much struggle there was. So I then felt really confused. I just thought, how am I going to help all these founders? It becomes really challenging. I think community building is a bit of a paradox. You're surrounded by thousands, hundreds of people, but you can be really alone because you can't rely on your members because you're the manager.
Yeah.
So that was the problem that we noticed. And then the key is to be niche. So it's not enough to be niche anymore. You have to be niche cubed, which is a framework that we talk about. It's a bit weird, a bit mind-blowing, but in the age of information overwhelm, people are mass unsubscribing for newsletters. People are unsubscribing from communities. People are just trying to get a hold of their calendar and their inbox, and we're over-indexed on all parts of our life. And so you have to be extremely niche to cut through the noise and send out a really specific signal into the world these days.
Well, at least as a starting point, though. Obviously, as you grow, you'll probably go a bit more general.
Yes.
Get bigger, right? Yeah. Okay. But at the starting
100%,
point, it's super
yes.
niche.
Yeah. At the starting point is niche cubed, and then you become niche squared, and then you can just become niche. So for us, niche cubed basically means pick 3 traits that a group of people have in common, and that is the criteria to join this community. Okay. So no one else can join this community unless they are a community builder. So that's their profession trait. They are in Melbourne. That's a location trait. And they are in the startup space. So that's an industry. That's super narrow. If anything, it's kind of exclusive, but that's the point because you want to bring 50 to 100 people together of that specific persona. Imagine if you just brought 100 Spider-Mans together. Spider-Man would be like, oh my God, I didn't know there was any other Spider-Man in this world.
Best community ever. Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh my God. And then they'd be like, you know what? Can Batman join? Can other superheroes join? They'd be like, yeah. So then they'd start to become niche squared, which would go, you know what? It doesn't just have to be for Melbourne anymore. Let's do Australia.
Yep.
And then the community collective we've been running since 2021, and now we're just niche. Now it's just for community builders, but you can be any industry and any location. Okay. So niche cubed is really helpful framework to say who this is not for, and be ruthless on that, and just say we can't serve you right now. We'll come to you, but hold up.
I really like that because
first step.
Sorry to interrupt, but focus is the main thing of strategy. So I always say at the beginning, hey, start really focused, and then you can get general later. But you need to carve out a competitive sort of etching, which you can then sort of expand as you go. But I think a lot of people don't think about that enough. They go, oh, there won't be enough people. But I think there are enough people in the population, more than you probably think, that are very strange or very specific.
Exactly. Yeah. If you serve everyone, you serve no one.
Yeah.
If it's just a general community, you're going to get very general results. And so if it's specific, you'll have specific outcomes.
Yeah.
And so then you've noticed this particular problem, you found a niche group who experience it. Now you want to engage with them early. This is a step that I think a lot of founders fail to do. So for example, let's take Tony. He's noticed this cool app that Tony wants to build. He notices this problem. He's being really niche and going to serve a specific audience. And then Tony goes away and he just builds the product. He spends hundreds of thousands of dollars. He builds this app and then he launches it to the market and no one wants it.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be like Tony, and we're going to engage early. So engage early is all about co-creation. So now how can you go to the niche cubed group of people that you found and ask them, what challenges are you experiencing? What goals are you trying to achieve? And how can we support you? Mm-hmm. And then what would you like to gain value from if we created a community just for you? So now I'm having 50 to 100 interviews with all of these different types of community builders in the startup space in Melbourne in 2021. I'm just spending hours and hours on calls with them. I'm getting buy-in. I'm relating to them. I'm building relationships. Yep. Surprise, surprise. Community is basically just really genuine relationships at scale. And if you build those genuine relationships correctly, it will scale without jeopardizing the experience. Okay. And so engaging early is about being in the minds of your niche cubed audience and understanding how you can serve them, and then co-creating the community together. So great. What do you want to do in this community? Do you want to catch up every Friday of the last Friday of the month and have wine and sushi? They go, no, I don't drink alcohol. No worries. No worries. What about a tea every morning on Saturdays? You know, is that my, if they go, yeah, that's great. Okay, great. Yep. Put it to a vote. Let's see the majority. I'll go to 50 to 100 people are saying wine on Fridays or tea on Saturdays. Everyone votes for tea on Saturdays. Cool. I'm going to go and do that. So now I'm listening and responding. The worst community builders don't listen. They make decisions without including their members.
Okay.
The best community builders will think of an idea, run it past the community, and then deliver based on demand. So it's just this ongoing process. But yeah, we're in the early days, so that's what we did. We, interviewed a bunch of people, and everyone wanted to meet up, so we sent out a calendar invite, and off we went.
Nice.
And then you obviously want to share the solution. So now we're at step 3. Now, you've noticed that problem, engaged with the niche cubed group, you've engaged with them super early, you've understood exactly what they want, you've voted on it, now you need to deliver. So sharing the solution. I heard you. Now I'm going to deliver on what you basically want. So sharing the solution for us was after that first meetup, everyone wanted to catch up monthly. So we thought, great. And then we basically caught up monthly after that. And it was, we were averaging 80 to 100 people online every month. We were borrowing the Zoom account of Blackbird Ventures at the time because our free subscription wouldn't host everyone and we didn't have any money. And so we were just connecting people, out of the goodness of our hearts. And we did that for a year, and it was successful because we obviously engaged with people super early. Mm-hmm. And then the 4th and final step, which is just this ongoing mindset of who, not how. This is a phenomenal book, Who, Not How. You can search it up online. And basically, the old way of thinking is if you want to build a community, you're thinking, how am I going to build this community? How am I going to find the right tech tools? How am I going to engage all these hundreds of people? How am I going to choose what happens and where I'm going to be? And how am I going to grow this and scale this group of people? It's just me. That is a very individualistic is the wrong word, but it's just a very narrow way of thinking, and it's not going to get you very far in community building. Whereas a who mentality, which is the new way of thinking, is asking yourself, who has mastered this before? Who can help me build this community? Who knows all about the tech tools? Who is here to support me, and who can I learn from on an ongoing basis? And who is going to be in this with me? So go find co-founders, go find other community, hire great team members if you have the budget. Just ask people to help you who are members, because that mentality of who can help me build this is a collective mindset that is going to help you in the long run. So then, and it drives accountability, much more longevity. And the first thing I did was find, okay, who can help me? And reached out to Jala, sent her a DM on LinkedIn. She's now co-founder of 3.5 years. She designed the whole brand. Messaged Melia, who was working at Blackbird Ventures at the time. And then the 3 of us have been involved since day one. And I wouldn't be here without them.
That's awesome. So you've kind of covered then, if you follow these little tests at the beginning, right? The 4 criteria that you must meet, and then you've created this that should probably, with the right mindset, avoid most of the common areas, right? But are there some common pitfalls that you have learnt to avoid over your experience, doing this many, many, many times, that are like you wish people didn't make these mistakes? Is there like a top 3 or something?
Yeah, definitely. There are so many mistakes that have been made, and I've managed over 6 different communities for individual companies, and then supported over 300 people to build communities for other companies. So I've experienced many, many mistakes myself. I've seen so many. Yeah. So I've got some runs on the board. Okay. So I think the biggest pitfall I see is launching the community on day one as a big launch, and that is the first day that people can join. So what's really hard about that is kind of like Tony building the product without getting a buy-in. Yeah. No one wants to join something that no one's been a part of. No one wants to walk into a party and be the first person there, and you're sitting down and it's empty and it's just this room that's meant to have 1,000 people in, and the music's blasting, the food serving, and it's just you. Yeah. What would you do? You might go to the food table and not talk to anyone. You might just leave. So it's really daunting to join a space when no one's in there. So priming the space is a great idea. And so the best launch is to not ever be public when you launch. Super counterintuitive. Everyone would go, what? That's the worst launch ever. But no, that's the best launch, because I would call up 40 different people and be like, I'm thinking about creating this new space. What do you think? You find your founding members, you fill the online space, and then when you're ready to take public applications and open the community, you can go, great. So then if, Doug wants to join the community, he joins and he rocks up to this party and the room's pumping and everyone's there. The dancers say, welcome, Doug. Oh my God, have you met Susan? Doug's going to have such a great time.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really key one. Another big pitfall is onboarding, the way we welcome people into a community. I think the first 5 days of someone's experience in the community is the most important. And if you screw up that first impression, it's going to be very hard to make up for it in the end. So classic pitfalls is onboarding people, just sending them an invitation to join the Slack community through Slack with no context whatsoever. Are there guidelines? Have a handbook? Is there a how-to video? What if no one's ever used Slack? They jump in, they're overwhelmed, they might have a bad experience. Or for example, if you onboard someone and don't introduce them to one other person in that first 5 days, a community is about meeting people. So if they don't meet anyone in the first 5 days, that's a massive missed opportunity. Yeah. And then just general overcommitting ourselves, I think, is the biggest one. Community builders generally are yes people, not perfectionists, but perhaps recovering perfectionists, people pleasers. There's a lot of those kind of terms get thrown around in community builders, usually talented. So people will go in the company, hey, this is community, you can organize our company-wide Christmas party. Hey, this is community, land all these partnerships with Google. Hey, this is community, can you order some more stock for the milk fridge?
It's like ultimate scope creep, right? Possibilities.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's full scope creep, and you just end up with this insane remit. And because a lot of people don't understand what a community manager does, we end up doing social media, marketing, website updates, events, partnerships, and community management. Yeah. And the roles get blown out. We don't know how to say no. Our boss is telling us one thing. So there's a lot of exhaustion and a lot of different moving plates in the air that I think can, just cause a lot of stress.
I love that. You did mention sort of that onboarding process. Like for me, when you were mentioning those three things, I was just thinking like basic product management, right? Like, you've got a SaaS tool, like onboard them properly, like pre-sell the idea beforehand, onboard them properly, really crucial because, you get PMF that way. And so it makes sense. But I think in the heart of that is like that time to value. So you're giving them value before the product is released or, the community is launched. You're giving them value instantly when they're on board. You're managing expectations. So really critical there, I think, is that if someone was going, hey, should we create a community, or there's talking about it at work or whatever, how would you say that it's valuable to the organization? Explicit, very obvious value that most people would be, observing once it started or be familiar with. And then maybe more of the subtle ways that you have learned that, oh, wow, this creates this really subtle halo effect, which then creates this network effect that then like blah, 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 that I think unless you've done it a lot, you'd easily miss.
Such a great question, John, because really what we're answering here is what is the value of community towards a company, right?
Yeah, like why?
And why? Why would we bother investing in this, fluffy thing where people are just having coffees and sharing photos and sharing memes all the time? It sounds like a time waster. Why would I build that, Paz? And I get this question all the time. And a question that I pose to a lot of other people is, would Canva be the juggernaut that it is today if they didn't have 150 million creators in their community creating millions of templates every day to share with the world? Would Culture Amp be the incredible HR platform that it is today if they didn't have hundreds and thousands of people geeks in their culture first community all around the world talking about what it means to build a great company culture? You look at companies like Asana, they have over 22,000 ambassadors, just ambassadors talking about Asana and sharing it with the world. Notion, they have chapters all over hundreds of different countries where people are just catching up and talking about how they have more productive tech tools at work.
Scaled like product evangelism or user evangelism or advocates in a way, really.
Yeah. Community is taking over from influencer marketing. I think we're seeing a shift currently where companies realize that in order to be successful and sustainable, we need to build genuine relationships with our customers, and we need to actually give a damn about supporting them in different ways that is outside traditional pay for a product or a service goodbye.
Because
and so
it's
what
really
we're
obvious,
seeing,
like, it's really obvious, you're talking about influencers, like, oh, hey, I use this product and it's awesome. You can tell they've never used it, right? Because if you had, you'd be talking about it in a different way. You could tell they're kind of like adapting a script or whatever. Like, when it comes to complex products, it's really like easy for me when I watch a video or some content that person's created, whether they're like genuine or not, right? And you can't fake like when you've used the product and in that community, it's like it's really obvious that, oh wow, this person actually uses the product and loves it. It's
exactly
instant.
exactly that's such a good point. And you think about, would you rather buy something from someone you've never met, or if 5 of your closest friends recommended this service, who are you going to believe? Obviously, we're going to buy from people that we trust. Trust is the hottest commodity at the moment. You can lose it in a second and you could take years to rebuild it. And so if you have a group of passionate advocates who are just sharing your company and brand around the world, would you rather spend $22,000 on ads and marketing and SEO that might get you to the 50th place on a website, Google search, or would you rather have 50,000 advocates who just make one referral a year to someone that your company might be able to serve?
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here, though, because like pretend I'm this like skeptical CFO or CEO who doesn't want to spend the money, right? And we're at the beginning of this thing, and like, oh, you got this idea to create a community, like, oh, great, Paz, like, yeah, but we've already got Google search here, and we've got a good funnel sort of happening, blah blah blah. Like, I'm going, so you're going to promise me like in 2 years' time there's going to be 50,000 people? This all sounds great, Paz, but like, I can't commit and a hire at 100K to be a community manager and set this up. Like, there's obviously a non-linear sort of curve here and a bit of a lag effect, and perhaps that's why the explicit sort of return on that investment is a bit more hazy for these people. How would you respond to that objection?
Yeah, it's such a great objection. And, it's really daunting as well for a lot of leaders to go, I'm not going to see results very quickly. And it sounds like a high energetic and monetary investment. So if I was speaking to this CEO, let's call him George. So I'm speaking to George or Georgina. Let's be a bit more progressive. I'm speaking to Georgina. And Georgina's a G, and I go, Georgina, okay, Georgina, where do you want the company to be in 2 years? Let's just look at the company goals. Georgina wants $2 million in annual recurring revenue, and she wants 5,000 new customers all through referrals. Be like, great. Okay, thanks, Georgina. Well, let's build out a plan to achieve that goal. I'll build out a plan to achieve that goal without a community and then with a community. And I'll provide 2 options for you, both with a 3-month experiment. And we'll run the experiments. You can pick which one, option A or option B, with or without a community. And we'll run a 3-month experiment, and we'll aim to have certain metrics achieved in that 3 months. And if we don't hit the metrics, we'll reassess and take stock in 3 months' time, and we can cut it. So I would then build out 2 plans of trying to hit, a 3-month segue to those goals. So let's say we want to generate $200,000 in 3 months, and we want 500 new referrals. I go, okay, well, build out option 1 and option 2. And let's say community building is one approach and not building a community is the other approach, say just traditional marketing.
Yep.
And then we'd basically look at the budget that we have. Do we have any budget? Okay, we don't have any budget. All right, what are we going to do there? And then what resources do we have? Is it just me and the team? Is there anyone else in the team? Yep. So that, I think, is a really key thing to understand. And then I would put that forward to Georgina. And let's say Georgina goes, all right, we'll do the community. We'll try it for 3 months and we'll see how we go. So then I would design a strategy, a community strategy. This is what we help people build in our cohort program, to achieve those 2 metrics in 3 months. And I would use community building to achieve that. And if we got to the end of the 3 months and Georgina didn't see the results, then community would not be a great strategy for that business. Okay. And they would be better off building that marketing plan to reach those goals. And that's totally fine. But if community moved the needle and actually generated $500,000 and actually generated 800 referrals in 3 months, Georgina and I are going to be sitting there over a cup of chai. She's going to go, okay, I get this community building thing. But there's no guarantee that it will work. And everything that we do is an experiment. And community won't be successful for every single company, but it can be for the right ones. But hiring and getting the skills right to find a community builder to build that experiment out in 3 months is key.
I really like it. So the value of it, just to summarize kind of what you said, is that there's this kind of word of mouth referral effect that can be quite non-linear and create these network effects that sort of grow over time and sort of explode, and then they become like attract your marketing assets in a way that then attract each ambassador attracts one or two more people, and then it sort of snowballs from there in a very sort of almost exponential way.
Exactly. And, building out an ambassador program can be one of the most successful growth strategies for a company, which becomes a community within itself of ambassadors supporting each other.
Yeah.
But I find that, I've built 3 different ambassador programs for 3 different companies, been running one at the Community Collective for 2.5 years now. And we've had people stay with us from day one for 2.5 years. I've been an ambassador with our company for 2.5 years. That's pretty much the same amount of time I've been running this company. So there is a fine art. But, one of the metrics for an ambassador could be introduce us to 100 people in 3 months. And you have 10 ambassadors doing that. Like, you just look at that effect. And I'm only managing a group of 10 ambassadors. Now, obviously, there's a whole not a hiring process, an application process and selection process that you would take for those ambassadors. It's got to be a two-way value exchange. It's got to be fair. But it's so fascinating to see more companies experiment with these models. But the biggest thing that we're talking about here is ROI. So do you want me to kind of dive into how to calculate the ROI of community? Because that is this big question we get all the time.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Unlocked question to talk about ROI and community. So ROI, as I've mentioned, stands for return on investment, which typically is a metric that companies use to, I guess, determine the financial return of a project, an investment, or a product. So you can have a negative ROI. Obviously, something is losing money. You can have a neutral ROI. It's just cost neutral. It's not costing or generating any revenue. Or you can have a positive ROI, which is ideally where a lot of us want to be, which is generating revenue. So you're getting more money based on the money you put in. So if Sally put in $100 to build a community and the community generated $1,000, that's a fantastic positive ROI. So to calculate an ROI of community, obviously we would need to calculate how much money is this community generating or losing. So in that 3-month time frame, if we're investing $100 into the community, and it generates back $1,000, then that's a really great ROI. But I think what we miss so much is so much of community isn't about money and tangible metrics and outcomes and measurements and numbers. Community is so much more than that. It's unique. It's profound. If you've ever had hardship in your life and you remember calling someone to rely on and that impact that it's had, that's really hard to quantify. And so, yes, there is this intangible, magical sense of community that is hard to put a number on it, but I don't want people to use that as an excuse. I have a list of 182 metrics to measure the value and impact of a community so we can quantify it, but it's the combination to accurately communicate the ROI of community is 3-part. You have to calculate the ROI, the financial return,
yes,
and then you have to communicate the tangible benefits, so retention, referrals, customer lifetime value.
Products,
let's look at those
ideas, that kind of stuff.
Yes,
Yep.
feedback, how many new referrals, and really understanding how many new members buy a new product each month. So we're getting some hardcore numbers here that are easy to understand if they went up or down or stayed the same.
Yep.
And then we have to pair that with the intangible. So the intangible is how many transformational stories have happened as a result of the community in the last month. How many testimonials have we had? How many articles has Tanya written about the community and her experience and then shared that with her mum, and then her mum joined the community and we're all here, and now it's just these real finite effects that it's really hard to track.
Yep.
It's hard to quantify, but it's so important. And I think where people go wrong in community building is when they're speaking to Georgina, the CEO, and Georgina asks, what is the value of this community, this company? The community builder goes wrong because we only speak about the intangible. We go, oh, wow, well, Bob had this beautiful experience had this great event. They only talk, right? Exactly. Yeah. They only talk about that. But to have a real strong case, we need to talk about the financial return, the ROI, the tangible metrics like retention, and the intangible like transformational stories. Then you've got a really strong case. But you need to know who you're talking to, because what you say to CEO Georgina and the CFO are going to be different things.
Yeah, you mentioned just something before, which is very interesting. You said, it doesn't work for all companies. Again, we've kind of got that litmus test, those 4 things that you said right at the start. But are there just some sectors or like types of products or services where like there's no point to it? For example, maybe you buy a product once and it's just not something that there's an incentive to refer someone else to. Example, I found out with like auction bidding, no one wants to be in a community with other bidders because they're literally your competition that will up the price when you bid, right? So this is very high acquisition costs and like zero referral sort of dynamic that goes in because there's a disincentive for referrals. So I found that kind of weird, right? So it probably wouldn't work in that explicit way. In your experience, are there's like, hey, if you're considering it and you're in this kind of sector or this kind of offering, do not do it?
Yeah, definitely. I think where the biggest challenges lies is really in the expertise. So companies might think, I'll build a community, but they don't really surround themselves with people who've done this in a professional sense.
Okay.
And so there's a lot higher fail rate there, because they launch the Slack, invite everyone to it, everyone's there for a week, and then they all die and leave. And they go, community sucks, it doesn't work here.
Yeah, so it's basically they hire a social media manager and they go, hey, create a Facebook group or like a Slack community and like just go for it. And then just like, oh, okay, how hard can it be, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's less about the type of company and more about the expertise they have around. But also, of course, it all comes back to business objectives. If a cafe is trying to have a really great hospitality experience, would a cafe launch a community to connect, local coffee goers? Probably no one wants to join the community. They just want to get a coffee, and that's fine. So it really just comes back to what is the business achieving and would a community benefit? But also companies where there's just no audience demand.
Yeah.
Do people want to join a community that's run by a legal agency? Maybe they're founders who are trying to get out of lawsuits. That might be a great community, but if they're supporting large construction companies, do these construction companies want to be in community? Probably not. So I think it just really comes back to those 4 signals.
Okay, and you kind of mentioned we're talking about labor here, right? Like a community manager. So what are some of the major costs that we need to know are like, hey, base level costs, you're going to have to at least do this, and then maybe in an ideal world you have a bit more stuff, and then really expensive communities like the best, if you had all your wish list tick, like, or, you need this, and it costs this much, like, is there some ballpark figures you can kind of like cost for people?
Yeah, definitely. So every year we actually partner with Australian community managers.
Ooh.
And they are a fantastic organisation that do a lot of training and support in moderation and defamation and many other areas. And we've partnered with them for the last 2 years to interview community builders in the startup space to uncover the challenges, salary ranges, budgets, all those kind of details that people might not share super commonly. And so it's all anonymous. We're just about to launch the second edition. And so the biggest things that we see there in terms of, your question around how much money are we looking at? Let's say like average salaries for community managers we can look at, and then also just average budgets for tech tools and running communities. So I think what we found in last year, so 2023, the average salary for a community manager in the startup space was about 70K to 100K as a ballpark. Yep. And then once you kind of look at more established companies, government, universities, we kind of look at that more 100 to 150K plus. This is for a full-time community manager role whose role is fully focused on community. Obviously, it depends if this community role requires strategy or not.
Yeah.
I think the lower the strategy, the lower the salary, less requirement for actually building and creating the strategy, more just for execution and ongoing maintenance. But what actually we've found in the last month for this year when we did the data again is that actually that range has increased into a bracket of 100K plus. So that is really interesting. So I think we're kind of sitting around the 100K mark for salaries. And then in terms of budgets have been quite scarce, I think, in community because there's a lot of apprehension. Yep. So especially if we're interviewing, people in the startup space, these are startups themselves, founders who are bootstrapped. They're not dealing with millions of dollars in budget. So we see a lot of the under 10K a year budget to run a community, and so costs that might be incurred, mainly tech tool subscriptions we see. So you want to host your community on disco.co, you want a butter.us subscription to run your online events. Okay, great, we're going to buy Slack, and we need a CRM, so we'll get Airtable. And so you're kind of adding up all those costs, and then just any budget if you're running in-person elements, so venues, events, food, etc. And so that kind of general resourcing. Once we start getting, there are budgets that we've been notified of over $1 million for community. And so, you're looking at communities with millions of members. They're buying swag and branded shirts for all their ambassadors across the world. They're doing training, and they've got multiple hires within that community. They have a whole community team. So we're looking at bigger budgets, and they're on enterprise platforms. So you're looking at something like Chorus, which is a great online platform for community. You can start to get their enterprise plan, and we're looking at, XE prices there. So because they have, millions of members, and so it should be, and they need ongoing support. So that's the kind of lay of the land. But my biggest encouragement, we built the Community Collective in 2021 with $0. We looked at partnerships, sponsorships, allies in the early days. And then even in 2022, we bootstrapped the Community Collective. I put $4,000 into the business at the start to basically pay for accounting and register the company, and then a website. And then we launched our first paid product, which is the training program, within 3 months. And the Community Collective became profitable. We paid that back. I've been on a salary since then.
Nice.
And then have basically never raised VC investment or grants or any external money. And so we're just very old school, just developing through this thing called customer revenue. So it's been this incredible journey. Yeah, I know. So weird.
Especially in the startup space.
Yeah, I know. So I think...
I really like that, but so basically, just to summarize, some kind of, you can start pretty dirty with a Slack group or something for free, or WhatsApp group, right? But then you're going to hit some sort of limit where they're going to upgrade you. You might need to go to the next platform, right? And the next one. Can you just give us a quick idea of what those platforms may be? So very early stage, just get started, then middle, and then you mentioned Chorus as an enterprise thing or something. What were they again?
Let's say someone's getting started, you don't have any budget, great platforms to use. You look at, first, when you're thinking about tech tools, the best way to make a decision is to remember it's not about the tech tool. Super counterintuitive. You want to go to where your audience is. So, for example, if I'm in the early days, I could pick Slack or WhatsApp, but it would be rude of me to pick this decision without including my members. So I need to engage early and go to everyone and go, hey, what are you using? John, do you use Slack or WhatsApp more? Which one are you using more?
WhatsApp.
Exactly. So let's say I'm building a community and we have 20 other people who are all using WhatsApp. That would be awful if I chose Slack just because I wanted to use it. I've got to take into consideration the members. So that's just the first advice when we're talking about tech tools. So then, you're looking at social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook groups, and then you're looking at communication platforms such as Slack, WhatsApp, Discord, Telegram. So they're obviously they're free. Very affordable, great for the budgets.
But you hit limits, right? I think because I remember someone was doing WhatsApp and they hit 200 members and they're like, oh, you got to upgrade, or you can only have so many people before you then got to pay or go to another platform. Is that true?
Oh, I haven't looked into that. We run a WhatsApp community, and so far so good, and we haven't paid anything. Okay. So I know I've been using free Slack plan for 3 years as well. So that's been going well. And so then I think the biggest tech tools that you need is one. communication, and then usually an online hub for resources. So we use Airtable, and we also use disco.co for our paid program.
Okay.
And then, other solutions, once you start really needing to pay for something, you can also just use Notion and have a full library in Notion. Notion and a WhatsApp, fantastic way to start. And then just all your meetups are in a park having a picnic, great. There's a great community. Do that for a year. Once you build traction, you get major demand and you can't manage everyone, then it's time to spend some money. Even if you have $1 million budgets at companies, I would still encourage you to not spend money because it's all about the connection, not the tool.
Yeah.
And then there's also, less sweat once if it doesn't work. You didn't spend any money on it. So then you're looking at more middle tier platforms like Mighty Networks.
Yes.
You're looking at Circle, Kajabi, all of your LMS Teachable, School. People are kind of building platforms there. And so that's a kind of more affordable range. And then you're getting up to enterprise software around Discourse, Chorus, Hivebright. These are kind of really robust. They just have every functionality you could ever dream
and they,
of.
You can skin your app. Like there's a mobile app that's dedicated to you, and like all
exactly.
Yeah.
Amazing analytics, support.
I set up Mighty Networks for a client like a year or two back, and they were like, "Oh, this is awesome! Only for 1,000 a year or something." I was like, "Yeah, because they had sort of hosted content over here on YouTube or whatever, but then they can do courses. They couldn't do pricing, and then they had the community over here on the newsletter, and it was all kind of messy. And they were like, "All right, we'll just use this one." It was kind of an all-in-one package. So they're like, "Oh, this is great," and then it became a huge thing. And that's kind of like my personal experience with community. Obviously, I haven't done it anywhere near as much as you, but it was a really interesting learning process. Like I tried to warn the client about this, but it's coming back to you, it's like they're worrying about which tech to go with and excluding the customer from that decision making. I'm like, it's not about the tool, it's about like getting people on there.
Exactly.
Right? And then once they're on there, getting critical mass so that like there's value once someone's on there. Like it can't be just they join and they go, "Oh, this community is going to be great," and there's like no one responding. I'm like, it's like crickets.
And
anyway.
Crickets is such a major sign of an inactive community, which we obviously don't want to see. But I think the biggest thing with tech is you're not trying to get people on your platform every day, all day, 24/7. That's very unrealistic. We can barely tend to ourselves that amount of time every week. So you really want to build habits. So building habits for members to use tech is about understanding, where do members already have habits? Okay, well, I could probably make an assumption that we both use email. Maybe once a day we would check it, and our calendar. We probably look at our calendar once a day. So I now have a habit of checking those platforms, and I probably might be on LinkedIn once a week, so I'm already there. So now I have a habit of using those tech tools. So how can you then go to people where they're at to then get them onto your platform? So for example, in our cohort program, every Monday at 8 a.m., we send an email with what's on for the week and with a prompt for people to engage in conversations in Slack.
Yep.
Then at the end of every workshop, we link in Slack to the recording, which is in the cohort portal. So I am now sending this regular rhythm every Monday at 8 a.m. Everyone, 102 people know that I'm going to send them an email, and they're going to open it, and it's going to be a prompt into Slack. So I'm using email to get them into the platform where hopefully they gain value from. So it's actually about habit building, not engaging on tech tools all the time.
Now, we did mention the one thing around like what people thought before they build a community and then afterwards. Now, this is a very specific question, a bit of a Peter Thiel question, but is there something about community marketing, community management that most people believe in, but which to be wrong or untrue?
The biggest misconception is...
It's a hard question.
Community will be beneficial for every business. Mm-hmm. That is a major misconception. Then on the other side, community doesn't generate financial returns is a huge misconception. Building a community has helped the Community Collective build a 6-figure business that's bootstrapped. I mean, if that's not an example, I don't know what. You look at Culture Amps, the valuation of these companies are huge.
Isn't it funny?
Of course, they have a great product and service.
Isn't it funny though, like how hidden this is? And this is why I want to talk about it with you. Like when we're doing growth strategy and I'm planning this out, like I'll recommend these different things to them. But it's just funny which ones they gravitate towards, which ones are easier to execute, or like more explicit value in a shorter time frame, maybe with like better measurability. That tends to be the ones they choose instead of like these ones that are a bit more slower burn, a bit higher friction, require a bit more skill and patience, and sort of take the long road. But like the compounding interest of that or compounding returns of that is so powerful. But not only is that powerful and valuable, it's a switch, it's a barrier to entry for other people because they don't go to that trouble. Therefore, it's sort of like when people are going, oh, why is Culture Amp worth so much? Oh, they look at the product, they look at the ads, and they go, oh, it must be technical features, or they have this feature, not that feature. It must be the brilliant advertising they do. Like I see them everywhere, and you're like, actually, it's just like some network effects from community. You know what I mean? Or like really good feedback loop with a customer advisory board and a community of ambassadors that sit under that at scale that is creating that. And I think for that reason, it kind of goes under the radar. Do you think or not?
You're so right. It goes under the radar because it's freaking hard.
And that's why it's valuable.
How many people just run marathons? They're thinking, I want to get fit. And how many people go, okay, I could go to the gym. I could start eating more healthy. Maybe I'll do 20 push-ups every day. There's some like pretty easy things that I could start doing every day that I would probably get some fairly okay results. But if I started running marathons and triathlons and started doing overnight hikes, it's really hard. It's daunting. There's not a lot of people that would just go, I'm going to run a marathon to get fit. So a lot of companies go, I'm going to build a community to be successful because it's hard. And there's a high barrier to entry because you're looking at long-term results. And of course, I think there's a lot higher stakes. If you spend $500 on some Facebook ads and they fail, no one saw that.
No.
If you spend $500 and you bring 500 people together and you run the worst event ever, you are just so on show there. It's really daunting. You're just it's so public. We are the face of brands. And if I build an awful community at the Community Collective, there's thousands of people that are going to know that. It's really
like the negative feedback loop was just as strong as the positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah. So we call that a death loop. We call that a death loop. So everyone wants the flywheel effect. Woohoo! Flywheel, amazing referrals. We're building when you've invested in a great strategy. But it can lead to a death loop if you've invested money and time into a community that is then awful. It's a leaky bucket. People are having the worst experience. You create a death loop. More people join and then they faster the leave. There's lack of referrals, low engagement, and people are just leaving. And then everyone's like, don't join that community. And so you just create a death loop. It's so hard. It's so hard.
Interesting that you mentioned events because I think this is where maybe some people dip their toes in the water. Like I'm recommending many B2B service clients, right, to start events because COVID's over. People are actually looking to go to events. But I was at one last night, actually, which is, again, a community, but it's an event branched off a community. So, and I've been to, some of your events, which are really good as well. And I think, like, some people go, hey, if we're getting a critical mass with these events, like, is there a way to manage all the attendees and then they'll bring along somebody else to the next one and blah, blah, blah. Like, do you see communities sort of emerging out of that? And what is the crossover between those two disciplines?
Yeah, definitely. So community is a strategy, an event is a tactic.
Okay.
So they're two very different things. You could have an event strategy, of course, but it usually is a once-off experience.
Sales funnel.
Yeah, exactly. That starts and ends.
Yeah.
And you might have an event in Melbourne, an event in Sydney. They are not related to each other. So running events is a great tactic to deliver a great once-off experience for someone. Of course, if you then run this ongoing event series, but if it's open to the public and you don't have a niche cubed audience, then it's not really a community. So your event is not a community unless you connect your community through events.
Okay.
Super meta. So I think we see more people doing events because there's a cookie cutter model, which is a great model and has great impacts if you do it well, that lead to great returns.
Yep.
And it usually can be dipping the toe into building a community. But I see, the downfall of when a lot of companies might run events online, an open webinar, open to anyone, it's free. and they might only have 4 attendees.
Yeah.
And then you've put in a lot of time and effort into the event, for example. So I think it's really key to understand what are the business objectives, where you're trying to go, what value you can deliver to your customers and audience, and then what is the best strategy and then tactics to achieve that.
Basic strategic planning, right?
Exactly.
Hard, is it? But
exactly, which you're really good at.
So okay, you do mention a couple of communities. Like, I'll let you go in a minute, but you did mention Broadsheet. Maybe some people, most of my listeners are not in Australia, but Broadsheet is kind of like one of those foodie sort of magazines, those Broadsheet sort of magazines that were very cool places. Then they kind of went online, and then you said, they created this community of like of fellow foodies who then created so much critical mass that it was like they'd have events at all the kind of places that the magazine were covering or originally covered. So really cool that happened. You mentioned some other big tech companies that people may be familiar with, Culture Amp, Canva,
people
of course
Asana.
know Asana. What are some other communities that you were like, hey, this is kind of the secret sauce that you found out that most people don't know about? Are there any sort of that spring to mind?
Yeah, definitely. I could talk about this for hours.
And
but
tell me about
just to give you
your own at the end as well.
Yeah, of course. So 2 that come to mind: Sephora.
Ooh.
So they makeup brand.
Yep.
They have an incredible community online of all these women talking about the products and the reactions that they have on their skin. And they all recommend products with each other, and then they send them gift boxes. They use a lot of great community building tactics of surprise and delight, rewards, incentives, leaderboards. You have this card, and then you get an extra amount of points,
It's
and
like
then you get a gift box.
almost.
So
Wow.
they've gamified the community experience. So Sephora is really cool. And then you look at amazing grassroots Australian companies such as One Roof, which is a community for women in leadership and business. And they just have this incredible community that originally started as a co-working space for women and then turned to an online digital membership. They're over 1,200 members.
Wow.
And these women catch up all over Australia and just support each other about building a community. So I think that's where we start seeing companies deliver a CaaS model. So SaaS model, software as a service, CaaS model, community as a service. So One Roof would be an example of that.
Okay, interesting. Just for people that are listening, I didn't know about FKS before when we were on the same panel at South by Southwest. I was introduced to you through Bryant Williams, who's also been on the show, talking about partnerships. So check that one out as well. So it was me, you, David, and myself on the same panel. And I was like, what is this FKS thing? And I'd been to South by Southwest Sydney the year prior, and I joined a WhatsApp group. This lady she was one of the speakers. She had this kind of QR code printed out. And she was like, hey, join this. So, next there's a side event, you can join up here. And I was like, this is so cool. And then for the next couple of days, I'm like, just met the coolest people at the coolest events. Like, hey, this one's free, come in here, or this one's really good. So it was like kind of my tour guide. You also luckily invited me to your WhatsApp group, and I was like, this is awesome. Then I kept seeing the same people at all the little sort of hangouts. I'm like, hey, you're an FKS or whatever. It's really cool. And it just happened the other day. I found I was talking to Fingertip founder. Do you know fingertip.com or something? Oliver Hoffman. I spoke to him years ago. Yeah. Like kind of like a Linktree competitor, like a new Linktree. And I was like, oh, is that the same guy? And I was like, oh, it was. I was like, so I keep meeting the same people. So really cool group. But FKS, like, what is it? So people can join it if they're interested.
FKS started as an initiative between Alan Crabb and Liz Van Zyl and myself at South by Southwest last year. So it's a WhatsApp group for operators, founders, and community builders in the Australian New Zealand startup space to stay connected and basically keep in the know across all these different conferences and events. And so basically we run pop-up WhatsApp communities before major conferences around Australia and New Zealand so we can all catch up and go together. I think WhatsApp communities are best used only to organise to catch up in person. And so, it's been really beautiful. We've done so many different conferences before: Sunrise, West Tech Fest, South Start, and Hexpo. It's been really cool just to bring people together. And we've had lots of conferences reach out to us to now do it as a strategy and pop it up before and got featured in Startup News. So it's just been beautiful. It is invite only though, so I won't plug it, but it is a beautiful space for people who can be invited through referrals and existing members. So if you ever meet someone through FKS or FOMO Killer Society, just ask them more about what it is.
Oh, very exclusive. Ooh. I did invite someone actually, and they were accepted, so they met the criteria, which is really cool because he was actually talking to me. I was down in Bondi, and he was like, "Oh, trying to get into this founder scene, and like, this other one is kind of boring." And I was like, "You should join FKS. I'll see if you can get. I can get you in."
That's
And
so
then, and he
nice.
did, and he's like, "This is awesome." So I really
Yay!
love it. Because he's like perfect. I thought he'd be perfect in terms of that.
That's great.
Who you're targeting. But then also
Thanks for the referral.
yeah, of course.
Community in action.
There you go. But you also have a cohort sort of product as well. So can you just tell us about that? If you're a community manager and you're listening or want to be one, maybe, or start a community, I think it's quite relevant. So can you just give us a quick sort of 2 minutes or 1 minute on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, of course, anyone listening, if you are currently building a community and you just find it tough, exhausting, lonely, we are really here to help you. And so we run this 8-week experience for community builders, operators, and founders to join from anywhere in the world to learn how to build a community strategy. And we basically wrap you in a group of support with people who are just frickin' in the weeds with you. So we just had Seth Godin this year as a speaker, people from 10 different countries. There's about 780 on a wait list, but anyone can join to hear about when applications launch. So head to thecommunitycollective.co/cohort and you can pop your details in to be notified when we open our doors. We only open our doors twice a year in March and September.
Oh, again, very exclusive. I like it. Well, I can vouch that I've been to your events and they've been very cool. Remember when we were at the pancake?
Yeah, the pancakes meetup.
Whoa! Did you have a video on that? That was hilarious. I got to put that in.
Oh, we have so many videos.
Okay, because so just for reference, I'll put it on the end. But like every time someone entered, those Japanese restaurants, they say something when you enter. It's like "ninasen" or something like when you enter. It reminded me of entering those Japanese restaurants, and then each new person that would come in like, "Woo!" It was like a Mexican wave.
It was a Mexican wave. Yeah,
very
exactly.
Cool. And everyone was like, "What the?"
It was hilarious.
The vibe from that was like so infectiously positive. I was like, that is the power, like talking about intangibles. People remember how you make them feel. And when you're in a community with like-minded people, it's a very social thing where you've got this vibe happening that you don't get through any other type of marketing communication or channel, I think. And that's, for me, that's the unique thing about it. Like, it's the ultimate branding experience in a way.
Yeah, and we all got to sit around eating pancakes at 8 a.m.
No, that was great. Okay,
lovely.
Cool. Hey, well, thanks, Paz. I really like giving us a really quick crash course in everything community, and I think that will give people a really good idea of what they're getting themselves in for, or if they want to find out more, to maybe reach out to you and maybe do one of your cohorts or join the community and see how everything works in real life. So thanks for getting stuck in the weeds with me.
Yay. Oh, thanks so much for having me, John. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful life that we live, being able to do this of service. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye. Ciao.